So if we're talking about a tripolar world, in the short term, we have a very aggressive, outwardly aggressive America to Europe. So where would that leave Europe, sandwiched in the middle of this tripolar world, if you had a Russia, China on one side and a hostile America on the other? In terms of worst case scenario, what does that mean for Europe if there were to be a
It
if there
means
were to be a war?
it mean well, it has to make this is why it has to make a decision really quite quickly. It doesn't want to. During the first Trump administration, there was huge alarm bells going off, and they just thought, we'll just contain him and hope he loses the election. He didn't. They just breathed a sigh of relief and went back to it. And now they're realizing actually the world is changing now. The world is changing, and it's not just because America might be invading Greenland. There's all sorts of things as well. America has withdrawn foreign aid from all over the world. That's a huge amount of soft power. Foreign aid is not an act of charity. It's a way of stabilizing parts of the world that are to your profit as a country. And it means that, because you make sure you publicize the fact that you are providing this money in these areas. So that gives you a lot of soft power in those countries. America withdrawing that funding doesn't remove the need for it. So China will just step in. So we're moving to a position where China is going to boost its influence. In fact, I was just reading some polling today from people all over the world in lots of different countries, and the majority of people in lots of countries, including Western aligned countries, Eastern aligned countries, believe that China is going to grow in influence over the next few years, because they're looking at the events that's happened last year. And it's not just that Trump is picking fights with his allies, that inevitably, because China is not, the China-Russian axis is strengthening, if anything, and the America-Europe axis is weakening. So even if the China-Russia axis wasn't strengthening, by default, that would be making them relatively stronger. But people can see what else is going on. It's not just militarily. It's in terms of foreign aid. It's in terms of, the trade tariffs are reorganizing supply lines. They're changing trade patterns, and they're causing people to diversify trade away from America. All of this is weakening America over time, and that's set in motion. So even if Congress flips to the Democrats later this year, even if Trump loses or MAGA loses the next presidential election to the Democrats, and there's somehow a peaceful transfer of power or some sort of transfer of power, and America sort of tries to get back on an even keel, too much will have changed already. Those supply chains are already moving. Once you've done that, it's a bit like with Brexit. If we rejoin the single market and customs union, if we rejoin the EU tomorrow, we wouldn't get back all the trade we lost. We would have to slowly try and rebuild, because those supply chains they've moved, they're gone, right? And someone's now got a reliable supplier. They're not going to change them again. So we would have to win, we would get an instant boost, but because we would just make the trade we already still have cheaper, but we would then have to win back custom. And the same with America. It would have to win back that custom, but it may well be that in a few years' time, that China-Russia axis has already solidified its by looking like a much more supportive partner. For example, one thing, Europe in particular, but Europe and America sort of, you would say, together, when they're trying to strike trade deals around the world, they emphasize certain things. I mean, America doesn't really agree on the standards of the products, but they do at least, or have at least, agreed on human rights. So there's usually human rights clauses. China aren't doing that. China is saying, we'll strike a trade deal with you. We're not interested in your human rights. That's a matter for you. So, China is going to look a lot more attractive as a trade partner, as a defense partner over the next few years. And no change of American government in a few years is going to be able to put things back to the way they were in 2024.